It started with the daughter who wanted to get baptized. Well, when she made the decision to get baptized, so did the rest of her family. And so the following Sunday, we baptized the dad, and then he baptized his wife, and then he baptized the daughter right there in a church service. And that happened from our school. Our church had zero budget for that. We had no money. This was totally an operation of faith. If I was so told you that we were going to go start a tuition-free school in Africa, nobody would have questioned that. But yet here in America, that is the view that we have.
If you're curious about what is trending in Christian education, you've come to the right place. Hi, I'm Delina Wallace, homeschool mom, microschool leader, and education missionary. And this is Wise and Otherwise, where we are sharing real stories from the front lines of a growing movement in Christian education. Stories of pastors, parents, and everyday believers stepping up in new ways to shape the next generation. From microschools to school boards, we'll explore how the church can lead in education again, creatively, affordably, and in true partnership with families. If you've ever wondered what role you can play, I hope these conversations help you find your next step. It is wise for the church to get involved in leading education. Otherwise, who will? Come on, Christians, let's lead the way and redeem education for the glory of God. All right, welcome to another show of Wise and Otherwise. I'm Delina Wallace, your host. I have with me today Pastor Justin Walker. He's in Kentucky from Salt and Light Church. Pastor Justin, thank you and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
Yes, so this is a follow-up interview. I interviewed Pastor Justin last year, and I heard about him. Actually, a mentor of mine sent me his interview. He was interviewed with CBN, and she was like, she knew I was all about pastors starting schools and churches supporting schools and these creative Christian learning environments. So she sent me your interview, and I was like, oh my goodness, okay, he's got it. He's got the vision. He understands. He's casting this vision with his congregation and his community. So thank you. I really wanted to have you back and do a follow-up and see how your first year has gone.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit, just the framework and the model of your school and what's it called?
Okay, sure. Let's start with the name, Salt and Light Academy. If anybody saw the interview from last year was First Principles Academy, but we changed the name and to match the church name. So it is now Salt and Light Academy. And, all that information is there on our website, church website and school website. All that information's there about as far as like the name. The model that we had is that we're tuition free. We're, if I kind of feels like a mouthful, but it's open to the public, Christ-centered education that is tuition free. So we're donation based. All of our funding is coming in via donations. When we say we're tuition free, we mean that we do not charge our parents or our students for a seat in our school. There is no charge to them, and there never will be a charge to them. That's the model that we're running on. And so we absolutely pay our teachers, we pay our staff, but we do that, and we pay for curriculum. I think we just ordered the first. I'm still have mixed information. I'm not at the school every day. I'm pastor of the church, but we have a principal of our school, a head of school, an assistant principal. We have staff workers, administrative workers, and then all of our teachers. So I'm not sure if it's the first semester or if it was for the whole year, but I believe it was for the first semester. It was like $22,000 for all the curriculum that we had just had to order. So yeah, definitely not free. People are like, oh, free school. Was it like, I had somebody say to me last year, they were like, well, is this going to be like a elongated BBS? And I was like, no, it's a school. Like we're a school. We're not just a Sunday school. We're a school. We have with math and science and English and history and all the classes. And so yeah, we are completely tuition free, donation based. We are running fundraisers throughout the year, and then of course just people hearing from interviews like this. The CBN interview did really well for us last year. People heard from all around the country, and 4 months. Actually, for the entire year, we received donation from people we don't even know. And we received donations last year from Arizona. We're in Kentucky. We received donations from Arizona, from Colorado, from Utah, from we got them from up north. We got some donations from New York, and people were sending in. They would hear about us and they would send in donations. And so all of that is funding for our students. What we won't allow is something like this. We've had parents say to us, I want to guarantee my child gets in. We want my child to be here. I'm willing to pay for that. Name a number, like tell me what it would cost, and we want to make sure a child's here. And we feel like that would be untrue to the model. That's just paying tuition in a roundabout way. And so we have to say to that, we appreciate that. And if you count our vision and you see what we see, please make a donation to the school, but your donation cannot guarantee your child a seat. And so we just keep those two things completely separate. Donations are nothing but donations, and children getting admitted to the school are children getting admitted to the school. I mean, we have a regular like private school policies. We have policies and we have interview procedures that we go through before we admit them, but it is completely open to the public.
Wow.
So
So, and you mentioned this isn't just for the kids in your congregation. This is a missional effort for your community, an extended invitation for children who come from unchurched families. And is that right?
absolutely. Yeah. One of the shocking things that some people come and it's hard for them to wrap their brains around this. We have a statement of faith, but our statement of faith does not say, sign this that you believe this. What we're saying when students come, we're saying to them, we need you to sign this to understand this is what we're teaching your children. And this is what we're based on. So our view is that our teachers are the missionaries. Our students are the mission field. That large mission field across America is what we're trying to reach. And so Jesus said those who are well don't need a physician, but it's those who are sick. And so we feel like that's the model we're running on, is those who need a physician, those who need to know about Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean we're the Wild West where we just go, oh, well, we just allow anything to happen in our school. No, we have very strict policy and procedure that we say, like, this is what we teach, this is what we allow, this is what we don't allow. And in our school, the wonderful thing is that when someone doesn't like that policy and they go, I don't want it, we had this happen last year. We had a mom say, I don't want my child, I don't want that for my child. And we said, well, but that's what we're teaching. Like, that's the whole point. And so, that particular family chose not to come, and we understand that not everybody is going to come. Not in these early years. I think as it catches on, there's going to be more and more that will come.
Mhm.
But we have zero problem with finding people who want to come. We have the opposite problem.
I bet.
How do you,
Yeah.
yeah, how do you choose who to save off the sinking ship? How do you choose which ones get to come and which ones don't get to come? That can be a very hard process. And so for us, a lot of it comes down to kind of first come, first serve. But we do have a interview process that we go through with our families and with our students as they come in
And
to make sure that they understand what we're doing.
yeah. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but you mentioned 57 million students in public schools, and that they are your mission. That's your mission field right there. Are these families that are sending their kids to public school? Oftentimes, it's because they can't afford another option. So, tell us a little bit more about that, your calling and your desire, and how you see that correlated directly with your calling to be tuition free.
Yeah. So that is a direct correlation. The number one reason for us to be tuition free is that we feel like, and I think the proof is right in front of us that many, many, many parents can look. I would say almost all could look at the public school system and say, "Hey, something's not right. Something's not right here. We don't like what's being taught. We don't like how this is going." And, for years, the argument has been, well, let's go to the school board meetings, let's fight from the inside. And listen, we're all about that. A whole part of our mission is to help support teachers that are Christian teachers who are in public schools, who can help spread the gospel in that place. We have a really long way to go. And that long way to go to reach to that 57 million is going to include having good Christian teachers inside a public school system. So we're not challenging that. What we are saying is that that's been said for a long time, and we're still seeing the darkness still seems to be triumphing over the light when it comes to those school systems. And I'm not the only one saying that. There's others that are saying that as well, and even non-believers can see that, and yet we see that there's a problem, and yet we still put our children there. And I'm not saying maybe me or you. I homeschooled my kids even after the passing of my wife. I homeschooled 5 children when my wife passed away because I was that determined to not put them in public school. But 57 million, that is a huge number. I mean, I think we kind of maybe glaze over that number. There was a missionary at our church the other week, and he was talking about their mission field, and they're reaching out to veterans and those in the Army. And he was going over these numbers in the Army. And I remember, everybody was shocked when he talked about like 2 million people was their mission field, and they had like 25,000 baptized last year. It was a really wonderful story. But I remember I leaned over to my new wife, Kelly. I leaned over to her, and I kind of whispered, and I said, "That right there is my point. Like 57 million is a huge number, and if there's 57 million American students going into institutions that we say categorically we disagree with what they're doing, but yet we keep putting our children there. So why? Why are we doing that?" And we believe that probably one of the number one reasons is the financial side. You know, um, if you have multiple children, the idea of private tuition-based education becomes very difficult. And some people can afford that and some people can do that. But I think that, again, the proof is in front of us. The majority cannot. And that's why they're putting their children there, is because the transportation is easy. They get food when they go there. They get, breakfast and lunch when they get there. Most school systems are adopting a free lunch policies. And then, as far as a tuition, do I have to pay extra? I mean, people have said to me all year, they say, well, we pay for those schools in our taxes. Well, yeah, we pay for those schools in our taxes, but that's not the same as me handing over a $10,000 or $15,000 check per student to have my child in a private institution, a private school. And so that's what we're offering is Christian private education, but we're not charging the tuition because our goal is to reach out to that 57 million. We want other churches to take on this model that we're doing and to adopt what we're doing and to start their own schools. And then we believe that that is the institution that can reach that. Who else could reach that 57 million? Who else has the institutions or the money? The church in America is not a poor church. And so, who else would have the money or the resources? Churches have buildings that sit empty 5 days a week. And so we want to challenge those churches to open up their doors, bring in students, bring in teachers, have classes, have schools in your churches. Like you've mentioned earlier, into that creative thinking. And I think that's what we're looking at as a creative alternative.
That's great. Well, I'd love to get into some of the logistics and to be able to cast this vision. I know pastors listening to you will feel inspired, that, okay, I get it. I feel the call. I understand the need, but tell me what this is going to look like for me. But before we go there, what I'd love to hear is some of your stories of transformation and the testimonies from families and students who've been impacted by your model and by the Christian school that you started.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, let me just start and tell you that, I could take you down through my inbox and just show you message after message after message of tear-filled messages and letters that come in the mail all year long that say how much, here's this mom that's saying how much I wished that there was something like this when I had, my kids in school, or, I wish I could get my son to bring my grandkids to your school, but just thanking us and praising us and, yes, generally sending in, a lot of times they're sending in donations with that. And that's everything from, people send in $50 or $100 to people have sent in, we received checks for $10,000, $15,000, and everything in between. And so I could give you all of those just as proof. But so our school, we opened, I told you a moment ago that we don't require the students to claim belief to come. Now, we absolutely make sure that they understand we're going to teach them about Christ and that is the model of our school, that we are a Christian school. And so we had multiple students come last year who were not already churched, who were not already believers. One such student came and within the school year, probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 months in, they started coming to church. They were not coming to church. They decided to start coming to church. They came to our church. That was a natural fit because they were already coming to school there and they were pleased with what we were doing. They were not coming to our school because they were Christian. They were coming to our school because they wanted something different than public school. And this was an alternative that they had heard about. And so they came to our school. A few months in, they started coming to church. It started with the daughter who wanted to get baptized, and she went and told one of her teachers that she wanted to get baptized. Well, when she made the decision to get baptized, so did the rest of her family. And so the following Sunday, we baptized the dad. And then he baptized his wife, and then he baptized his daughter right there in our church service. And that happened from our school. Let me give you a number. We started last year. Now, I need you to understand when I say this. We announced in February of 2024. We announced it. It was Super Bowl Sunday. We said, hey, we're going to start this school, this tuition-free school. I remember one guy came to me from church. He came to me later after we'd already launched. And he said, Justin, the day that you made that announcement, I went home and I looked at my wife and said, well, that was fun. Meaning like the church was going to close, like we were going to fold up because of what it just said. And so we announced in February. Not only did we announce in February, but then we said we were going to launch that year. That was the goal, and we did. So from February until September, we built out the rooms and hired teachers, hired a head of school, a principal, hired somebody for administrations. We brought all these people on. We have a model and a method, which I could share with you. But just to say that from February till September, we launched. We would have launched as big as the Lord allowed, but we needed money, we needed building permits, and we needed teachers. And so we said, we'll go as big as the Lord allows if we can get all of these things. And we got some of them, but not all of them. So we were able to launch K through 6. We would have gone K through 12, but we went K through 6th grade in the first year. And so we were able to take in 65 students. Those students cost us about $10,000 per year per student. That's the average cost that it's costing the church, is about $10,000 per year per student. And we knew that. And I need you to understand, our church had zero budget for that. We had no money. This was totally an operation of faith. We did not have $2 million sitting there that we said, oh, well, we'll pull out $600,000 from our $2 million. We had zero. We had nothing. And so we launched in September with K through 6. We had 65 students. We baptized last year. We baptized 6 of our students, 6 of 65. So 10% of our students, we baptized them. And the families that came along with it, that came with those students, that when the students got baptized, we baptized a dozen people in our church last year. 6 of them were students and 6 of them were families that came along with those students. And we feel like that is probably one of the best proofs that we could give to say, here is a need that even non-believers can see. They can look and they can see something's wrong. We need something different. And they know that public school isn't a great answer, but yet we still, and honestly, kind of even legally, we're forced to. If you're like the state of Kentucky, you have to be in school under the age of 16. You have to be in school, and so that can be any school. That can be homeschooled. That could be a private school. That could be a public school. But you have to be in school under the age of 16. You're not allowed to not be in school under the age of 16 in Kentucky. And so legally, here's a parent that says, well, mom works, dad works. If they're together, both parties work. What do we do with our kids? We can't afford private school. We don't like public school, but they're not 16. And so what do? They force their children to go to the public school because that's where they can get them there in the morning. And that's where the buses pick them up. And it's the part that it's available. And so because they want to be obedient to the law and it's available, then they go for that. So
yeah, I think it's just there's such amazing opportunity there. You even mentioned like legally students are required to attend school. So if pastors and churches are looking at this, and saying, wait a minute, we have this prime opportunity to serve families in this direct, very practical need. Every single family is looking for some educational solution, for their kids and the right fit. So to ignore that or to disengage from the education arena is just kind of like crazy. We're always thinking, how can we bless our community? How can we make an impact? Where are we called? How can we see transformation, salvation, all of these things? And I would argue it would be right there in our own backyards in K-12 education. And I know you see that, and it's really encouraging to hear you share that message with other pastors. So if I can ask you just a few things, for you as a pastor, you mentioned you're not there at the school every day. You're pastoring your church. You've hired a principal, an assistant principal. You've got teachers and things like that. So has this burden been heavy for you? And how would you advise other pastors who say, there's no way I could possibly fit this with my already busy schedule? Thanks again for listening to this episode of Wise and Otherwise. We'd like to ask you to take a minute and please rate and review our podcast so that others can learn more about us and just to continue to show your support for this work that we're doing It would mean so much. So please, if you're on Spotify or Apple or YouTube, take a minute and give us a good review.
Well, I wouldn't ever want to be dishonest about it. I mean, is the burden heavy? I mean, I guess that depends on how we look at heavy. If we're talking about workload from an earthly perspective, sure, there is an amount of work that goes into this, and you're not going to get away from that. Um, I do think there's something to be said about the Lord's burden being light, and the physical labor might be there. The race that we have to run, we've got to run with endurance, right? That's biblical. Um, but yet there's something that is freeing when you know that you're being obedient to what God's calling you to do. And I think that churches are looking, actively looking for their mission field, and we fly over that mission field to go somewhere else. If I was to get on here, and I probably have said this, I might even said it on this podcast last year, but if I was so told you that we were going to go start a tuition-free school in Africa, nobody would have questioned that. They would have said, "Oh, well, that's what the way it should be in Africa. You would totally start a tuition-free school in Africa." I mean, if as a matter of fact, if I had implied that I was going to charge African students for a school, you would have been like, "They can't pay for that." Like that. What are you thinking? Like, you can't go to some tribe in Africa and start a school and then expect them to have money to pay you. But yet here in America, that is the view that we have. Let me try to give an example to answer your question. You said, like, what would I say to pastors? Here's an example that I would give you. Imagine with me, we got to play a little game, but imagine with me that churches in America had no music. We were all doing worship. We were all preaching. We were all teaching the word. We had Sunday school classes, but we didn't have bands get up on the stage. And then here comes this crazy little preacher, and he's like Ezra, and he goes, "Hey," remember Ezra in the Bible? He's like, "Hey, this is in the law. You're supposed to sing them to the Lord." And could you imagine if those churches were like, "Oh, well, we let concerts come in." I mean, our church is getting ready to have Micah Tyler come in. We had John Reddick come in back in the summer, and Micah Tyler's coming here in a month. And so if I say, "Well, I mean, Micah Tyler sings here, and John Reddick sing here," and this guy goes, "No, no, no, but wait a minute, we're supposed to be singing." I just want you to imagine, really play this out. If no churches had any music, I want you to think about that. I know of two churches right here, minutes down the road from me. They have spent over $1 million just on their speakers for their churches. Most large, the mega churches are spending millions and millions on lights. That's AVL, audiovisual lights. Imagine the pastor who has no singing, nobody on the stage, and he goes, the equipment alone would be millions. And then what about the talent? How are you going to find somebody to come in every single week and sing concert quality music at our churches? I mean, the talent, where are you going to find that person? These guys have 5 songs, or maybe not 5, maybe they got 15 songs or 20 songs in a professional band that they go on tour and play those same 20 songs. You want our people to play 5 new songs every single week. How would you do that if you had no music in church and then somebody said, add music weekly to your church? You would see that as this huge burden. But look at our churches. We figured out, even the smallest of churches puts an emphasis on having good music in their churches. We pay for expensive equipment. We pay for lights. If we have to, we'll even pay for some of the talent. Most of the time we get creative and try to find volunteers and people who would do that, but we make it work because it's biblical to sing and make a joyful noise unto the Lord. Well, the Lord also said to teach these things unto your children, to write it on the doorpost and to put it into songs and to teach them so when they're older, they won't forget it. And he says, raise them up in the admonition of the Lord. And when they're older, they won't depart from that. And the church should actively be doing that. And I think once we take that role on, is there an amount of work there? Well, sure, just like there is if we do music, but it's definitely a worthwhile endeavor. And though it might feel like, you've added to your plate, you're also going to have the part that you can say, I'm being obedient to what God's called me to do. I don't want to take the talent that the Lord gave me and bury it in the ground. I want to be a multiplier and take it and get others to do the same. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you have already shared this model with other pastors. Have pastors been reaching out to you saying, we want to do something similar? what does that look like? Have you coached some and have you seen some others kind of replicate your model there?
Yeah, so I would say, again, just in fairness to this, it has been a year and a summer. So we've had one school year from September to May, and then we took a summer break and worked on expanding the school, and we've done some of that. But within that year, and then over the summer, we absolutely have had multiple churches that have reached out to us, pastors who have reached out to us, and I would say the word I would use right now would be inspiration. They're inspired by what we're doing and they want to do the same. I wouldn't say that we've coached anyone yet because I just don't know that we've had that opportunity, but I totally see that. That's our goal. Our mission is in four folds. We got four things we're trying to do. One is build it inside of our church building. We want that to be the initial model that we tell other people, like use what you have. We call that the Moses model, right? Moses gets to the Red Sea and the Lord didn't say pick up a rock and throw it in the water. He didn't say, go and write something down. He said, what's in your hand? Use what's in your hand. He took his rod and he struck the water and the water parted. Use what's in your hand. And so that's what we feel like is the first part is the church, like the building. Then after moving from the building, we're expanding. We have a stable, like an outbuilding, because we have our church is an old horse auction. And so there's a stable on the property. So we're going to remodel that and make that into more rooms, but that's still kind of within that what's in your hand model. Then we want to build on the property. We want to build an actual school building. That's phase three. Our vision on our property is a school for 1,200 students. That's the goal. And so we have 72 acres where we are, and the goal is to put a school building on that property. That would be an entire school. We're talking auditoriums. We're talking classrooms, the whole deal, everything. Sports, if the Lord wants us to do that. There's always questions about sports, but if the school decides to go that way. But then that's phase three. Phase four for us is to have a foundation to help other churches do this. And we feel like we're kind of in this pioneering stage where nobody, at best people are like, all right, well, we're for you. But nobody really has any answers about how to make this happen. And we hope to be a foundation to say, here's some answers to make this happen. But we haven't had necessarily an opportunity to coach anyone through that yet. But I can tell you that, maybe just 2 months ago or 3 months ago, a gentleman called me from a church in another county here in Kentucky. And he was asking about our school and said, I would love to come up and take a tour. And so I got to bring him up and give him a tour and showed him all around. And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to take this back to my elders and I'm going to, talk to them. And, we want to do this over in this county, and I said, we want you to do that. He asked me, he said, would you all feel challenged by this? And I said, no, this is our dream. Our dream would be that every church here's our vision. This is the vision that we have, that if you walked into a church today and they didn't have any Sunday school classes or small groups, you'd be like, that's kind of weird. Our vision is that, 25 years from now, that if you walk in a church and they don't have a school, that you would go, well, that's kind of weird. Like, why don't you have a school? Every church has a school. That's what we feel like. Well, that's how we feel like you're going to affect that 57 million, is to activate the church at large and get the church to be a part of this mission that's right here in our own backyard that we've been blinded to. We felt safe for so many years to send our children there. But I think 2020 was a big eye opener for a lot of people to say it's not as safe as we thought it. Maybe we thought it once was.
Right. Yes. Amen. Well, I have that vision with you that I just think right now, with our work with the Hero Project, we are really emphasizing, we're shining a light on pastors and churches that are doing this. We're elevating the work. But really, we just need to normalize it. Like, this just needs to be not just this amazing, like, oh, look at what Pastor Justin's doing in Kentucky. It's like such a rarity, no one's doing this, right? In maybe less than 25 years, we could be able to say, everyone is doing this. This is just what is natural, what is normal for a pastor and a church. So I also want to ask you about, so you mentioned fundraisers and donor support. What does this look like for your own personal congregation? Are they carrying the burden and the financial load in any way through tithes and things like that? Right now, do you have anything in your budget to support the school?
Yeah. So the answer is simply put, no. It is still solely based on donation. So the only thing that the school is receiving is via donations. Now, is our congregation getting behind that? Absolutely. Is our congregation donating to that? Well, sure. I mean, their pastors promoting, we just said we're going through first annual on Sunday mornings. And so, guess what the topic was when we're talking about David and Goliath, right? Like, I mean, there's a natural fit there that our church is referencing and talking about. And I'm super passionate anyway. It's not hard to get me to talk. So, get me going on a topic, especially one that I'm passionate about. And so when the school comes up, it's a passionate thing. So naturally, people are latching on to that. But is there a line item in the church budget that is subtracting from what the church has to give to the school? And the answer is no. And actually, that's for us. That's again part of that leap of faith. Is our church is in a precarious situation that we grew really fast. When my wife passed away, locally people were hearing about it, and COVID had just happened, and so a lot of churches were still closed. And if you can't tell, we're bold personalities, and so we were staying open, and people were coming because it was a place to come. It was a church that they could come to. So we went from 30 people to 300 people in church in less than a year. And so when that happened, we started looking for a place to go because we'd outgrown our building. So we ended up in a building, this huge building where we're at now. And that's one of those funny things that the Lord does. Because in the moment, we were like, we didn't know we were going to start a school. We were like, this building's way too big for us. What are we going to do with all of this? It's 57,000 square feet. What are we going to do with this giant building? But the Lord opened the door in such a way it would have been silly to say no. So we took it. We took on this building. We took on this responsibility, and now we can see why, because we've started the school in this building. But that being said, we still have to buy this building. And so, we had this building that we have to purchase. And so there's always this question in everybody's minds. They say, well, are people giving to the church? Are they taking away, from what they would have been giving to the building? And we feel like this, again, it's just an act of faith to say, I can't say that no one is taking away from what they would have given to the building to give to the school. But I can say this. I mean, there's a million other things people could have given to besides our building fund. So if they didn't want to give to our school, they could have given to Compassion International or, you know, again, a million other things. And so we just believe that the Lord's got a plan for all this. And so for us, it's every bit of it is an act of faith, including the donation to, receiving donations to pay our teachers. We want our teachers to be paid well. We're not quite there yet with all the wants. We would love a day that we can challenge the public education system and say that we offer health insurance and benefits. And we don't really have that yet, but our teachers are not volunteer. We're paying those teachers full-time salaries to be there. And we had a teacher for every class. Interestingly, this year we moved because we went to a full middle school. We added on 7th and 8th grade this year. And so we now have, and this year we've started a rotating model for our middle schoolers. So our middle schoolers have one teacher one teacher does science and math, and then she'll do 6th grade science and math. And then we have another teacher doing Bible and history. And so that teacher doing Bible and history, those 6th graders go 6th grade math, science, and then they'll go 6th grade Bible and history. And when they move over, then 7th graders will come in, and 7th graders do math and science, and then 7th graders go do Bible history. And so we have 3 teachers and rotate that model through. And I think we'll probably do the same. That seems to be working really well. And so I think that the model that we're going to adapt as we move into high school, that we'll put in rotating teachers for high school as well. So,
Well, you're definitely getting some things figured out, and year after year, getting more systems in place and figuring out what works. And you mentioned pioneering this, you're paving the way. I do believe that as pastors want to do something similar, I know who to direct them to. Like I can, lead them to you, and people will reach out to you, I'm sure. Your story, as you were talking about your church and the Lord just blessing you with this building that was really big. And, he knew what was in your future and what he was going to be calling your church to. And you didn't know that. And it reminds me of a story here in Kansas with Pastor Dave Atherton. I interviewed him several months ago. And he's in Derby, Kansas here. And he had a really similar thing. Like the Lord blessed him with this church building. And then they kind of got another church building. And he's like, well, what are we doing with this other church building? And it turns out that there were 2 schools that were just kind of floundering in the community. One was a hybrid part-time model, and one of them was more full-time. But they merged and they came under. He basically took them under their church ministry. And he also had a similar understanding of this, like what you were saying, we're not going to charge our students to come in because that's just not what we would do. Like we wouldn't do that in Africa. Why would we do that here? Now, their school model, they do charge a tuition, but his understanding when he took these schools on is he took on the cost. Like the church covers the cost of the facility, and they're not charging these two schools that are now one school to operate there, because he's like, we wouldn't do that for our youth ministry. Like we don't charge, we don't have our youth pastor and our youth group meeting there, but we're going to charge you for your time that you're there. So why would we do that for our school ministry? It's something the Lord's called us to. And whether they're meeting Wednesday night like a youth group would, or they're there Monday through Friday, this is a part of our ministry. We will cover the cost. And so, but you've taken that even a step further where you would say, well, we're not going to charge kids to come to our youth group. We're not going to charge kids to come to our school either. So I love.
That's literally an example we use. We say that often. Like we wouldn't charge, we're not charging tickets to come into church on Sunday morning, and we don't charge people to take their kids into the nursery. It's not like, oh, you can come to church for free, but the nursery, if you put your kids over here, you got to make sure that you pay those nursery workers. We cover that cost and we absorb that for a Sunday morning. And it feels daunting when you think of those numbers. It feels really, really daunting. I was on the phone with a guy. I actually am I get to speak at an event for Herzog in a month from now. In October, I'm going to be out west speaking at one of their events about what the Lord's been doing with us in our school. And I was talking to this before I got that meeting. I was talking to this guy on the phone, and he was like, well, tell me about the school. And you can tell it's almost, you ever have those situations where you can tell somebody's not interested? He's like writing as I'm talking, and almost like he's distracted. And so I'm going over like I've been with you about stuff about the school and our model and our thoughts. And I made the comment that it was about $10,000 a year per student is what it was costing the church. And he said, and how many students did you take? And I said, 65. And he just paused and he looked up and he said, and this was like maybe, I think this was around end of school year. So we weren't quite done with the whole year yet. And he said, wait a second. He said, that's $650,000. And I went, yeah, I guess if you think of it like that. And he goes, you raised $650,000 in 1 year? And I went, oh yeah. I mean, we've just been doing it month by month, as the months come, we just do fundraisers or, put out if there's a need, and then people give. And he said, Justin, we are a multi-million-dollar organization, and to have something launched fresh and then bring in $650,000 in 1 year. He's like, do you understand like how big that is? And I was like, well, I guess, yeah, like, like me. But my point being that, it feels daunting if you think of it like, oh, well, we're going to have 5 days a week, or we're going to have all these teachers, or we got to have administrations, or what about curriculum? I promise we didn't know anything about curriculum. I didn't know where to get curriculum for all these students. I knew how to homeschool, like I homeschool my kids, but I don't know how to find curriculum for all of these students. And you have the questions like, well, what about special needs? What about IEPs? And, these sorts of things. What do we do with those? And the answer that I would give to that is just like anything else. You take it a step at a time. If God calls you to do it and you do it, you take it a step at a time. Sometimes you take it a week at a time. You just say, well, here are all the things on my plate. That feels overwhelming, but here's this one thing. I'm going to focus on this one thing. I think the old saying is how to eat an elephant. It's one bite at a time. You just have to take the one bite that you can chew on and say, this is what I'm working on. And that's what we've been doing for the year. And the Lord just continues to bless that over and above. Like, I mean, it really has been amazing. We can't hardly go anywhere in our community right now that I was out. My wife and I had just gotten married. This was back in December, or maybe it was January. Somebody had given us a gift card to this like a date night for couples, and you like cook. And so everybody's at these like counters where everybody cooks their own thing. There's like a shelf, and he's teaching you how to cook something. Like we don't know how to cook, but whatever. And so we're like there, and we're all around this thing, and like there's like cooktops all around. There's probably 30 people there, and everybody's chatting with each other as we're making things. We're cooking things. And somebody said, "So what do you do?" And I said, "I'm a pastor." And I said, "Where are you a pastor?" And I said, "Salt and Light." And I'm telling you, like a whole row of people like, "You're the church with that school." And we were like, wow, but that happens. We get 30 minutes down the road, 45 minutes down the road. And I had, there's some people in our church that are in the local seminary, and they were at seminary, and they said they were at Salt and Light, and the whole class was like, wait, you're the one that's so
That's so great.
I'm in agreement with you to say, like, right now there's this like you know, oh, that's so great what you've done. We want to see that the church at large would adopt this. I want to be like John the Baptist in that and say, he must increase and we would decrease. And I don't. If 25 years from now, if schools around the country are started in churches and nobody remembers Salt and Light, but they've all got schools, that's great.
Yeah.
It's not about our name being made. It's not about our school being made something big. It really is about seeing a movement made in America that churches would take education as the mission field and they would take that seriously.
Yes. Yes. Amen. Well, okay. Thank you so much. You are a wealth of information and knowledge and inspiration. As people want to reach out and connect with you, can you share your website or email address? What's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah. Sure. Well, that's simple. So, church website is saltandlightky.org. And then if you'll just put a little slash school on that, then you can go right to the school page or you can see it on the drop menu there. So saltandlightky.org. That's the website. And then if anybody wants to email me directly, they can do that. Justin@saltandlightky.org. So it's just my name and then at the church's name.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I just very much appreciate you sharing your vision again and just the success of your school. I pray blessings over your ministry, your church, and your school, and your staff, your family, everything. Congratulations on your somewhat recent marriage and the expansion of your family now and everything. So good times.
Does. I appreciate that very much. And I appreciate what you're doing here. I think that this is a good inspiration, a good way to get the word out, to get churches inspired to do the same.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to our listeners. Have a great day.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you.